It was a Thursday, just another rainy, uneventful night in Havenwood. I was curled up on my sofa, half watching an old movie, when the clock struck 12 midnight. That's when I heard it. A knock. Not friendly, not familiar. 3 slow, heavy thuds that rattled my bones. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, or maybe old Mr. Henderson from next door, but the knocking came again, louder, more insistent. I crept to the door, peered through the peephole. Nothing but the empty, rain-soaked porch. Against my better judgment, I opened the door a crack. The cold air rushed in, carrying a scent of wet earth and something ancient. There stood a figure, impossibly tall, cloaked in darkness. No face, just a void beneath the hood. A skeletal hand pointed at me. Then a voice echoed inside my head. "Ilara, your time is almost done. 2 days until Saturday at midnight." My mind raced. Was this a prank? A nightmare? I tried to laugh it off, but the figure didn't move. The cold radiated from it, chilling me to the core. I slammed the door, locked it, and pressed my back against the wood, heart pounding. Silence. No footsteps, just a heavy, waiting silence. I stood there, breathless, the warning repeating in my mind. 2 days until midnight. I wanted to believe it was a joke, but the fear was real. The Reaper had come to my door, and he knew my name. I was no longer safe in my own home. The countdown had begun, and I had no idea what to do next. In Havenwood, the Reaper's warning was an old legend. Death would visit, give you 2 days' notice, and your fate was sealed. We'd always laughed it off, a ghost story for tourists and bored kids, but now the story felt real. The image of that cloaked figure haunted me. I tried to rationalize it, stress, a prank, a bad dream, but the dread was spreading, cold and certain. The legend was no longer just a story, it was my reality. Friday was a nightmare. Every tick of the clock felt like a countdown. I tried to act normal, groceries, a call to my sister, but every shadow made me jump. As night fell, I locked every door, drew the curtains, and turned on every light. I sat in the center of my living room, hugging my knees, telling myself it wasn't real, but the dread wouldn't leave. Then, just after sunset, the temperature dropped. The lights flickered and died. In the darkness, a shape formed, the Reaper materializing from the shadows. I was paralyzed, unable to scream. The voice echoed in my head. "1 day. The clock is ticking, Ilara." Then he vanished. The lights returned, but the chill remained. The hope that it was a prank was gone. The Reaper was real, and he was coming for me. I was running out of time. I had 1 day left. The fear was suffocating. I needed answers. I needed a way out before midnight came again. Sleep was impossible. By Saturday morning, desperation drove me to the town library, the oldest building in Havenwood, keeper of all our secrets. I tore through books on local legends, searching for anything about the Reaper's warning. Every story was the same. The warning, 2 days, the end. No one had ever tried to escape. No one had ever fought back. The legend was treated as law. Hopelessness washed over me. Was I just supposed to wait for midnight? I slammed a book shut in frustration. That's when I sensed someone behind me. My heart stopped. I turned, expecting the Reaper, but it was only Mrs. Gable, the librarian, and she looked like she knew exactly what I was searching for. Mrs. Gable sat across from me, her eyes sharp and knowing. "The Reaper's warning," she said quietly. "A frightening story, especially when you believe it." I whispered, "They say your fate is sealed." She shook her head. "Stories are told by the ones left behind. The Reaper is bound by rules. He's a player in a game. Games can be won by a clever trick," she added, a faint smile on her lips. My hope flickered. What kind of trick?
She looked at her hands, a long scar visible. He expects you to be afraid, to accept your fate. But what if the soul he expects isn't the one he finds? He must take a life. The legend never says it must be yours. She stood, leaving me with her cryptic words and a monstrous idea. I sat there stunned. Was it possible to cheat death? Could I really do what she implied? The seed of a plan took root. I wasn't sure if it was hope or horror, but I knew I'd do anything to survive, even if it meant becoming something I never thought I could be. Midnight was coming. I left the library in a daze, Mrs. Gable's words echoing in my mind. He must take a life. It doesn't have to be yours. The idea was monstrous, but it was a lifeline. My mind raced. Who could I bring to my house at midnight? My family was far away. My neighbors were elderly. My friends were few. The plan felt impossible, but the alternative was worse. I thought of Mr. Henderson, kind, frail, always offering to help. The thought made me sick, but fear was stronger than guilt. The Reaper's rules were clear. A soul at my house at midnight. I spent the afternoon preparing, setting the stage for something unspeakable. Every action felt heavy, every step a point of no return. 6 hours left. I was no longer just a victim. I was becoming something else. The hope that had sparked in the library was now a desperate fire. I was ready to do the unthinkable. Midnight was coming, and I would not be the one waiting for death, not if I could help it, not if I could cheat the Reaper. As the sun set, a cold calm settled over me. I made tea, set out biscuits, and forced myself to smile. I walked to Mr. Henderson's house, heart pounding. "Would you join me for tea? I'm feeling a bit lonely tonight," I lied. He was delighted, grateful for the company. We walked back to my house, and I led him to the living room. I placed his favorite chair in the center of the room, right where the Reaper had appeared before. I poured him tea, my hand steady despite the storm inside. He smiled, unaware of the role I'd cast him in. He was the bait. He was the sacrifice. I watched the clock. 15 minutes to midnight. The final minutes crawled by. Mr. Henderson shivered, confused. The clock struck midnight. The lights died. The Reaper materialized, a column of darkness in the corner. I shrank back, trembling. Mr. Henderson gasped, staring at the hooded figure. The Reaper turned to him, raised a skeletal hand, and pointed. "Your time is done," the voice echoed. Mr. Henderson slumped forward, the teacup shattering on the floor. The Reaper stood for a moment, then lowered his hand. He had collected his soul. He had kept his appointment. I had survived, but the cost was unbearable. The silence was suffocating. I had cheated death, but lost myself. The Reaper lingered, then turned his hooded gaze to me. I had won, but there was no triumph, only horror. The voice echoed, this time with chilling amusement. "Clever, very clever." Then he vanished. The lights returned, but Mr. Henderson was gone. The silence was absolute. I didn't call for help. I just sat, staring at what I'd done. I had my life, but the Reaper had taken my soul in another way. The person I was before was gone. Now the silence is my companion. Every shadow, every knock reminds me of what I did. I survived the Reaper's game, but I know he'll be back. He is eternal. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear a whisper on the wind. He is waiting.
With a map. Not a treasure map. Not a guide to a forgotten peak. Something darker. 2 maps lay before me. One a web of cave systems, the other a grim scatter of missing persons. The overlap was chilling. Too many disappearances clustered around cave entrances. This wasn't just bad luck. The maps whispered a story of people vanishing at the edge of the known world. Official reports were vague, lost hikers, no foul play, but the map told a different tale. It suggested people were drawn to these dark places, pulled in by something unseen. The cave systems looked like a predator's net, the missing its prey. Were these accidents, or did they stumble onto something they shouldn't have? Nature has its own rules, raw, powerful, unforgiving. These caves, ancient and secretive, had swallowed the modern and prepared alike. Phones, GPS, technology, none of it mattered. They were gone. The connection was too strong to ignore. It felt like a warning, a challenge. I knew I had to see it for myself. Staring at maps wasn't enough. I had to go to the source, to the threshold where people had disappeared. One area stood out, the Blackwood sinkholes, a notorious cluster of deep vertical caves. The density of missing person reports there was staggering. It was the heart of the mystery. The decision was made. I would go to Blackwood. This was more than an expedition. It was a confrontation with the unknown. I packed my gear, steeling myself for what lay ahead. The maps were no longer just paper. They were a summons. I felt the weight of every red dot, every vanished soul. The story was unfinished, and I was about to write the next chapter. I wondered if I'd return to add my own mark to the map, but curiosity outweighed fear. I had to know what secrets the darkness was hiding. The journey would begin at the edge of the Blackwood sinkholes. I would stand where others had vanished, and I would try to understand why. The unknown was calling. I was ready to answer. The map was my guide. The darkness, my destination. The decision to go wasn't made lightly. Friends warned me. Some mysteries are best left unsolved. My companion was Marco, a geologist and expert caver. He believed in logic, not legends. He argued the disappearances were just coincidence. Caves are dangerous, remote. But I saw curiosity in his eyes. We prepared meticulously. Ropes, harnesses, lights, rations, every piece of gear checked and double-checked. In the wild, your equipment is your lifeline. The night before we left, I stared at the maps one last time. The red dots felt like ghosts. Marco tried to reassure me. We go in, we document, we come out. Simple. But I knew it wasn't that simple. We weren't just going to look at rocks. We were stepping into a story with a grim history. The call of the void was strong, and we were about to answer it. Our plan was clear: enter, explore, and return. But plans rarely survive contact with the unknown. The Blackwood sinkholes had claimed many before us. We hoped our preparation would be enough. As dawn broke, we set out, the weight of the mystery heavy on our shoulders. The journey ahead was uncertain, but we were committed. Curiosity and caution in equal measure. The line between bravery and foolishness was razor thin. We crossed it willingly. The forest awaited. The caves beckoned. We answered the call. The unknown was no longer a distant idea. It was our next step, and we took it. The drive to Blackwood was a descent into isolation. Paved roads to gravel, gravel to dirt, civilization fading behind us. Cell service vanished. Radio static filled the air, and the world grew wild. The trees twisted into strange shapes, fog clung to the ground, and silence pressed in. The woods felt ancient, untouched by time. As we hiked in, the air grew colder, the ground uneven and treacherous. Every step felt like entering another world. The silence was loud. No birds, no animals, just the wind. Marco focused on his GPS, but I felt a knot of tension growing. It was the instinct of prey, the sense of being watched. The forest felt like it was holding its breath. We pressed on, senses heightened, every shadow a potential threat. The closer we got, the heavier the atmosphere became. The smell of damp earth and stone signaled we were near. The premonition was undeniable. We weren't just approaching a cave, we were approaching a threshold. The forest seemed to warn us, turn back. But we kept going. The unknown was just ahead, and it was waiting. We stepped forward into the heart of the mystery. Suddenly, the ground vanished beneath us.
A vast, gaping maw in the earth, the main blackwood sinkhole. A sheer drop, a perfect circle of blackness, 50 feet across. The air pouring out was frigid, metallic, lifeless. My flashlight barely pierced the darkness. The bottom was invisible. Marco set up the ropes, all business, focusing on safety. I noticed faint tracks and scuff marks near the edge, signs that others had stood here before. Then, half buried in moss, I found a small leather-bound compass, old, cracked, frozen in place. It was a relic, a link to someone who had vanished. The darkness had called to them, just as it was calling to us. We stood on the threshold, the weight of the unknown pressing in. The cave was a wound in the world, and we were about to enter. The decision was made. There was no turning back. We clipped into the ropes. The descent began. The story was no longer just on the map. We were living it. The rappel was the point of no return. I backed over the edge, swallowed by cold and darkness. My headlamp carved a small circle of light in the black. The rock was slick, water dripping in a steady rhythm. Marco followed, his voice echoing above. The walls were jagged, side tunnels branching off into deeper darkness. It was a maze, easy to get lost, easy to disappear. We landed on a ledge, not the bottom, but a sloping chamber filled with boulders. Every step was treacherous. A twisted ankle here would be fatal. The air was thick, hard to breathe, the weight of the earth pressing down. Then we found it. A modern hiking boot wedged between rocks, laces still tied. No sign of its owner, no other gear, just the boot, alone in the dark. The reality of the map's story hit us. We were no longer observers. We were walking the same path as the missing. The cave was not just a place, it was a predator, and we were inside its jaws. Deeper in the cave, the feeling of being watched became certainty. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound was amplified. Marco stopped talking, his focus shifting from geology to survival. Then we heard it.